Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. Last week, Home Minister Ami Shah, during his tour in the northeast, announced that the India-Myanmar border will soon be fenced and the old system of free movement of people on both sides up to 16 kilometers would be stopped. It has created some kind of a concern amongst at least 3 or 4 northeastern states and of course people living along the border in Myanmar. What exactly is this free movement regime that has been in place for years together between the two countries, and what are the implications of a fence that the government is hoping to start constructing soon, is the subject of this week's Simply Nitin. I'm Nitin Gokhale. So the India-Myanmar border is about 1643 kilometers spread across 4 northeastern states, starting from Arunachal Pradesh down to Nagaland, then Manipur, and then going down to Mizoram. And each of these states have some population of Chin, Kuki origin and of course called the collective name for these people of the ethnic identity that I spoke about are called Zo people. They are spread across the border, across these 4 states and bordering areas in Myanmar. Now, the India-Myanmar border is a legacy issue. It was derived from the Treaty of Yandabu, which was signed between the British Empire and the then King of Burma in 1826. After the Burmese were defeated and the British then annexed or took over Assam as well as Manipur, or the undivided Assam, or the northeastern states that as we know now. Since then, this border has been sort of created by the British and continued to be accepted by both independent India and independent Burma, and now called Myanmar. And since 1970s, this free movement was allowed between the people on both sides in these 4 states of India, or India's northeast, and people living along the border areas in Myanmar. Now these border areas in Myanmar are relatively underdeveloped. They are far away from the urban centers in Myanmar or even the capital of Myanmar, and therefore the people in those border areas find it easier to deal or to have trade, have commercial relations with states in the northeast, especially Mizoram, Manipur and Nagaland, not so much in Arunachal Pradesh. They also derive the comfort from the fact that they have same ethnicity, or more or less the same language, same way of living and same way of eating. And therefore there have been no real problems between the two people on both sides. They moved from one place to the other. They traded with each other. Maybe even barter trade happened between different villages on both sides of the border. And then the government formalized it in 2016, implemented it in 2018 and called it the free movement regime. It used to be free movement rights earlier. It was called free movement regime in 2018, where people from both sides were allowed to travel up to 16 kilometers in the other country. So if villagers from Mizoram or Nagaland or Manipur or Arunachal Pradesh wanted to go across into Myanmar, they could go right up to about 16 kilometers inside Myanmar and vice versa. This was working fine until the recent ethnic crisis in Manipur and the 1027 movement in Myanmar, which occurred more or less around the same time frame. And people started getting displaced from their homes in Myanmar after the rebel conglomerate took on the Tatmadaw, or the Myanmarese army, or the Myanmarese military. And the clashes in the border areas between the military, the Myanmarese military and the 1027 rebels meant that villagers and even soldiers of the Myanmarese army fled to India. Nearly 50,000 Myanmarese citizens of course, Zo ethnicity have migrated or have taken refuge in Mizoram. Some of them have taken shelter in Manipur, in the hills of Manipur, and which has then contributed to the rising tension between the Kukis and the Meiteis who live in the plains of Imphal Valley, and the Kukis who live in the hills of the Manipur state. That has meant that the cauldron has boiled over. The volatility of the situation has meant that there are law and order situation. There is a problem of insurgent groups taking advantage from both sides because of the uncertainty and the kind of influx that has taken place from Myanmar side. And this has now become a headache for both the governments in the northeast, the state governments in the northeast, as well as the centre. Now again, the state governments have a different approach to the entire problem. While Mizoram does not want the border to be fenced, Manipur, which is witnessing large-scale violence sporadically for the last 1 year or so, has been demanding a strict vigil on the border. The Assam Rifles, the country's oldest paramilitary force, has been deployed along the India-Myanmar border, but it is impossible to police or protect every inch of the border because it runs through mountainous terrain, rivers, jungles, thick jungles where there is no connectivity, road connectivity, and therefore there are many areas in which people can move freely across each other's territories. That has meant that disruptions have happened in projects which were jointly taken up by India and Myanmar, like the Kaladan multimodal project. That has happened. Similarly, the state governments in India have been complaining about drug trafficking, arms trafficking from Myanmar into the northeast, which has added to the tension in these states. And according to the Assam Rifles, as I said, the kind of seizures that they have done in 2023 alone, that they have recovered nearly 20 odd weapons, contraband worth nearly $900,000, smuggled goods from Myanmar, and drugs which are worth more than $11 million. Now, these vulnerable regions also create problems of insurgents taking shelter in each other's territories. So some of the insurgent groups from Manipur have gone across and established camps in unpoliced areas in Myanmar. And some of the Myanmaris soldiers and Myanmaris groups have fled to the Indian side, creating the problems. So therefore, the centre has now said that the border needs to be fenced, and there would be no free movement of people without visas, which would of course create its own problems. And there is a school of thought which says that age-old ethnic ties and age-old ethnic systems which allow free movement of people from both sides and allows the local economy to flourish should not be abandoned or should not be stopped so quickly just because there is a spurt in these activities of smuggling, of insurgent groups moving from one place to the other, law and order being sort of getting volatile. They say that this should not be the case. Both sides, that is both governments, must try and find a solution to this temporary problem, as this school of thought believes. But there is a school of thought in Delhi which says that India needs to have borders which are defined, which are protected, and which are regulated. Therefore, now it depends on how the two sides will sit down and do it, whether the government in Naypyidaw, that is the capital of Myanmar, will have any bandwidth right now to even agree or discuss the proposal for a fence, because after all, both sides have to agree. Although India can build the fence unilaterally, but given the fact that India has good relations with the military junta in Myanmar right now, or any other government that comes in the future, India will have to keep engaged with that government It depends on how the government in Naypyidaw or government in Myanmar reacts to India's proposal. But at the moment, there is a lot of consternation in the northeast about how this fencing might disrupt and disturb the age-old traditions, age-old systems, and the kind of kinship that exists between people on both sides. Mizoram, as I said, has already opposed it officially. The newly elected Chief Minister of Mizoram has told the centre that it is not a good thing to happen because there will be social unrest. There will be, because there are villages which see the border dividing them. There is a village in Nagaland called Longwa, which actually sees the border run right in the middle of that village. So one part of the village is in Myanmar, the other part is in India. Similarly, areas exist in Manipur and in Nagaland or in Mizoram where this kind of a situation exists, where people marry into each other's families just because they are across the border. They don't see themselves as different from the people living in Myanmar, or Myanmaris don't see people living in Mizoram as different from them because they have family connections, they have social ties, they have age-old celebrations during their festive days or festivals. So all this will get disturbed is what Mizoram is saying. On the other hand, as I said, Manipur is opposing it because of the other reasons of law and order, social disturbance, and insurgent groups in the Kuki areas being aided and abetted by arms and ammunition or even money or drug supply coming in from Myanmar. So there is a catch-22 situation for the centre because it has to take into consideration opinions of all the state governments which have a border with Myanmar. But this is a peculiar and a typical example of what happens when faulty border lines or border lands have been created because of the old British legacies from the 1800s, and that persists. So Northeast, as I have maintained many times in my writings and my talks, has suffered from the partition or faulty demarcation of borders in the old days in the 19th and the 20th centuries, and that has created or has continued to create problems for people in the Northeast. For instance, connectivity with the rest of India from the Northeast has been a problem because of creation of first East Pakistan, then Bangladesh and Myanmar, of course, and therefore if, for instance, a vehicle has to travel from Agartala, the capital of Tripura, which has nothing to do with the topic that we are talking about, but just as an aside, it has to travel for 5 days to come to Calcutta. If Bangladesh allows the movement or transit of vehicles from Agartala to Calcutta through its territory, then that travel time gets reduced by nearly 3.5 days. That is, within 12 to 15 hours, vehicles can come from Agartala to Calcutta because the age-old road connectivity exists. It's just that countries have got, or the areas have got divided into 2 different countries. So that's the peculiar problem that you have. Of course, there are security implications that the government will have to take into consideration, but that is something which is already a dilemma in the minds of the decision makers, because they cannot go against the people's wishes all the time and yet have control over law and order and, of course, insurgency in the Northeast, which can change its, the peaceful nature or the peaceful days that or months that it has been seeing for the past so many years can get disturbed if this free movement is allowed. So let's see what the decision is and how, when and how this fence comes up, if at all it comes up. But it has thrown up an interesting debate as far as the Northeast and Myanmar is concerned. I thought I'll flag you for this. I flag you this subject for you this week, and of course invite discussion, comments and feedback from you on this program, which comes to you every Saturday on StratNewsGlobal. Do keep watching and of course send us your comments. Until the next time, it's goodbye.